Let's pop the cork on one of the most fascinating and, frankly, luxurious categories in the entire beverage world. In this explainer, we're demystifying the science, the deep-rooted traditions, and the sheer luxury behind your favorite bubbly drinks. Whether you're a casual enthusiast or someone who loves geeking out over the intricate details of winemaking, this is going to fundamentally change the way you look at your next glass.
So what makes a celebration taste so expensive? I mean, think about it. Ringing in the new year, watching a driver spray the crowd after a Formula One win, or christening a massive new ship. Sparkling wines are universally linked to glamour, exclusivity, and luxury. But why? What is actually happening inside that bottle that elevates it from just a standard wine to a globally recognized symbol of success and, let's be honest, drives up the price tag? That's the core mystery we're solving today.
Okay, here's our tasting menu for today's explainer. We'll start with the magic of bubbles, and then uncover where that fizz actually comes from in creating the fizz. From there, we'll walk through the traditional method, look at tank and transfer methods, and then host a heavyweight matchup, Cava versus Champagne. Finally, we'll wrap up with some practical tips in reading the label.
Section 1. The magic of bubbles. Defining the science of celebration.
Before we can really appreciate the artistry here, we have to understand the foundational science. This is what strictly separates this high-end category from your standard still wines. It's not just a different flavor profile. We're talking about a totally different physical state happening inside your glass. A natural sparkling wine holds a massive 3 to 6 atmospheres of pressure. To put that into perspective, that is roughly equivalent to the pressure inside a standard car tire. All of that force trapped right beneath that tiny cork, it's absolutely crucial, because that incredible pressure is exactly what creates the wine's lively, energetic character.
So how do we formally define it? Well, a sparkling wine is made from white or red grapes or a mix, but the real magic happens during a second fermentation. And crucially, this has to happen in a closed environment, like a sealed bottle or a sealed tank. Because the carbon dioxide released by the yeast has literally nowhere to escape, it dissolves directly into the wine. When you finally pop the cork and release that pressure, boom. That trapped gas is the secret behind that continuous, slow-rising stream of beautiful, fine bubbles.
Section 2. Creating the fizz. Where do the bubbles come from?
Now that we know what it is, we need to talk about how that carbonation actually gets into the bottle. Because, spoiler alert, not all bubbles are created equal. This is where quality and price really begin to diverge. On one side, we have natural sparkling wines, like Cava or Champagne. Their carbon dioxide is endogenous. That just means it's created naturally from within during that second fermentation we just talked about. This yields a really persistent foam and a fantastic, high-quality mouthfeel. On the flip side, we have gasified sparkling wines. Here, exogenous CO2 is injected artificially into the wine. It's kind of like making soda. It's the simplest, most economical way to get effervescence. You'll often see it in basic Lambrusco. It gives you bubbles, sure, but it generally represents a much lower quality.
Section 3. The traditional method. The gold standard.
If natural, endogenous carbonation is the goal, well, this is the most famous, labor-intensive, and highly regarded method in the entire world for achieving it. It's a completely bespoke, bottle-by-bottle process. Let's break it down. In step 1, a base wine has a liqueur de tirage, which is a mix of yeast and sugar added to it right before the bottle is sealed. The yeast eats the sugar, creates CO2, and then dies off, leaving behind this sediment called lees. In step 2, riddling, the bottles go onto inclined racks and are gradually rotated over weeks. Why? So all that sediment slides right down into the neck. Now, step 3 is fascinating. They freeze just the neck of the bottle, trapping the sediment in an ice plug. When they open it, the gas pressure brilliantly blasts the frozen plug right out. That's called disgorging. Finally, in step 4, a dosage liqueur of wine and sugar is added to determine the final sweetness. So yeah, this intense, tailored labor, that's exactly what you're paying for in those high-end bottles.
Section 4. Tank and transfer methods. Scaling the bubbles.
But what if you want to produce sparkling wine for a larger audience? Producers really needed a way to make these wines more commercially accessible, but without sacrificing all the quality of that natural second fermentation. Enter the transfer method. Invented in Germany, it's widely used in New World regions like the US, Chile, and Australia. Here's the deal. The second fermentation still happens inside the bottle. But instead of that painstaking, bottle-by-bottle riddling and freezing we just learned about, all the bottles are simply emptied into a massive, pressurized cold tank. The sediment falls to the bottom, the wine gets filtered, and then it's rebottled. It's a smart shortcut that saves some labor, though interestingly, it still involves similar costs without always reaching the absolute highest quality of the traditional method.
Now, if you want real factory-level scale, you use the Charmat method. Also known as Grand Vase in Spain or Martinati in Italy, this method basically skips the bottle entirely for the second fermentation. The whole shebang, the wine, the yeast, the sugar, goes straight into giant closed stainless steel tanks. Because it's done rapidly and the wine spends way less time sitting on those dead yeast cells, the resulting wine is much fruitier and fresher. This cost-saving process is the secret behind those affordable, large-volume favorites you probably know well, like Italian Prosecco or German Sekt.
While we're talking about variations, I absolutely have to mention a unique category, needle wines. Look at the pressure drop here. We're talking only 1 to 2.5 atmospheres. These wines, like Vinho Verde from Portugal or wines from Bodegas Peñascal in Spain, sit right at the halfway point between a still wine and a sparkling wine. They undergo fermentation in sealed containers just to trap a little bit of CO2. When you pour them, the bubbles release playfully, but they don't form that thick foam at the top of the glass. It's a really cool middle ground.
Section 5. Cava versus Champagne. Clash of the Titans.
All right, now that you understand the elite traditional method, let's look at a real-world showdown between the two most famous wines that use it. We're going to explore their regions and their highly guarded recipes. First up, Cava from Spain, with 99% of it produced in the beautiful region of Catalonia. Just look at the incredible diversity of grapes they're allowed to use. For whites, they lean heavily on Macabeo for fruitiness, Xarel·lo for body and creaminess, and Perolata for fine aromas. But they also throw in Subirats and Chardonnay, plus a whole roster of red grapes like Garnacha, Monastrell, Pinot Noir, and Tripat. This massive blending palette gives winemakers the ability to craft highly complex, totally unique profiles.
Now contrast that with Champagne from France. They rely on a very stripped, highly regulated French trio. You have Chardonnay, which is the only grape used if you see Blanc de Blancs on the label, and that adds incredible finesse. Then you have two red grapes, Pinot Noir for body and Pinot Meunier for a fruity roundness. Now wait a second. Here's a truly surprising fact straight from the source material. How on earth do you get a white champagne from red grapes? Get this, the winemakers actually use activated carbon to decolor the red grape juice. Wild, right?
Section 6. Reading the label. Decoding the rules.
Okay, this is where we turn all this technical knowledge into highly practical, real-world application. International bodies like the OIV and European regulations demand strict labeling, so literally all the clues you need are printed right there on the bottle. Remember step 4 of the traditional method where they add the dosage liqueur to set the sweetness? Well, the terms you see on the label are the regulated result of that exact step. If you hate sweet wine, look for brut nature. That means there's zero added residual sugar. It's totally dry. As you move down the list through extra brut and brut, the sugar limits gradually increase. By the time you hit medium dry or sweet, you're looking at over 50 grams per liter of residual sugar. Understanding these classifications is a total game changer. It empowers you to confidently predict exactly how a bottle will taste before you ever spend your money.
Which brings us to our final question. Which method will you taste test next? Think about it. You now possess the structural knowledge of a true connoisseur. You know exactly why a traditional method Cava commands respect, how a Charmat Prosecco gets its fruity zip, and exactly how to decode the label to find your absolute perfect sweetness level. I really hope you take this newfound expertise straight to the wine aisle and start experimenting. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and until next time, keep exploring.